Levin from Lurie Children's, who is with Strengthening Chicago's Youth, or SCI. Rob Castaneda from Beyond the Ball. Chet Johnson from West Humboldt Park. Sorry, Chet Jackson, the agenda is wrong. I knew that. From West Humboldt Park Development Council. And Jadine Chou from CPS's Safety and Security Office. And so I'm going to join them up here, and I think Larry also is joining up here. I don't know where he just went, but he'll join us when he gets in. And Dan is also going to join us up here for the conversation. And our hope really is that all of you will also join us for the conversation. And so, again, that's why we're doing this sort of strange format of having us on an elevated platform in the middle of the room. In the past, we have our panelists sort of, up at the front, and then if you're in the back, you can't really see them, and you feel a little distant from the conversation, and it's more of a traditional Q&A format, which is not what we're striving for here today. So I'm going to start us off with a couple of questions, and I will periodically turn to you all also to ask these questions, and I will then get off the platform and start running around the room to get the mic to you so that we really can have this be an engaged dialogue. So the first question I'm going to put to the panelists is really to give them a chance to talk for 5 minutes or so about their work as examples, really great examples of efforts at this intersection of violence and safety. And we don't have any particular order, but I guess since you're sitting right next to me, Jadine, you get to start.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you. I'm Jadine Chou. I'm the Chief of Safety and Security from Chicago Public Schools. We've been very busy. We just started school August 26th, and I'm happy to say that for the most part, it's going pretty smoothly. For those of you not familiar, we just went through one of the largest school transitions across the country ever. We just consolidated approximately 50 schools. And I'll tell you, watching the children go to their new schools, their new welcoming schools, was extremely exciting. I know there's been a lot of media coverage on it. You can imagine, from a safety standpoint, that was our priority in making sure that children could get to their new schools as safely and smoothly as possible. And for the first week, I'm very happy to report that we had a very smooth week and a nonviolent week. Which was really important, and is important to the families and the children and us and the whole city. So just really quickly, one of the key initiatives that you might have seen in the news that we're focusing on that relates to this is our Safe Passage program. So we've expanded our Safe Passage program, which was originally only in 35 high schools. We've expanded it to cover all of our welcoming schools. Which adds essentially doubling the program. So we added about another 50 plus schools to that. Over 1,200 community watchers placed along key safe routes that we've defined in partnership with CPD, parents, students, and principals. Again, so far so good. You'll see things on the media every now and then. Trust me, we're working very hard to make sure this program is smooth, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about it.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Levin. I work at Lurie Children's on Strengthening Chicago's Youth, or SCI. Let me say at the outset, because I only have a few minutes here, I may talk pretty quickly. So you can find more information about SCI at our website, which is SCI, so it's scy-chicago.org. So SCI is really Lurie Children's approach to violence prevention. And in particular, when the hospital decided that it wanted to reach out to the community and do violence prevention, we looked at how we can build on the very successful model of CLOCC and apply it to the really important community issue of violence. I should also say that a lot of my thinking on this, I learned from books during my Master's of Public Health program. I learned about the reality of public health a lot from Larry. So you'll probably hear a lot of Prevention Institute kinds of things and some of the stuff Larry was talking about when I talk. So our goal with SCI is really to connect partners around a public health approach to violence prevention. So we're looking at connecting partners across sectors, across communities, really building on the fact that the hospital has a lot of reach and a lot of credibility. Our focus is on policy systems and environmental change, like CLOCC. So there are a lot of groups that do a lot of direct service work related to violence prevention. That's not our focus. there are really four main areas of activity that we're working in right now. And I should mention, SKY is pretty new, so we kicked off in February of last year. So we're about a year and a half old. So not all four of these activities are fully developed at this point. We have kind of different levels of activity in each of the buckets. So the first one is advocacy around our policy agenda, and we do have a policy agenda that's available on our website if you want to look at it. One thing that's probably of particular relevance here is that our top policy priority relates to access to parks as a safe space, as a place for positive youth development programs. We're also really involved in neighborhood level engagement and advocacy, and a lot of that work will focus around parks as well, so how communities can really take ownership of their parks as a community hub, as a place where children and families can spend time safely. Our third area of activity is knowledge sharing, so that organizations don't have to reinvent the wheel, so they can share information with each other about successes and challenges, examples of tools. We also provide training. So for example, later this month, we're going to have a Gangs 101 training to dispel some of the myths about gangs and the work that we're doing in violence prevention. Next month, we're going to have media training for SKY partners. And our fourth bucket of activity is really to facilitate connections between community organizations and academics, so that for people in community organizations who say want help with community needs assessment or program evaluation, we can help connect them to academics who are able to help with that, and we can get academics out of their offices and into the community and doing work that makes a difference in the lives of people. And we have a grant from the National Institutes of Health to support some of that work, so we're really excited about that.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Castaneda. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Beyond the Ball. About 1998, my wife and I moved into a little village. I'm originally from South Chicago. My wife's a Chicago public school teacher. That's what took us to Little Village. After living in the neighborhood for a year, we had our house set on fire for calling the police by the Latin Kings, one of the largest gangs in Chicago and in the country. And that happened twice, and then they came a third time, threw a bottle through the window, and while they were screaming they were going to kill us for calling the police, my wife and I decided that we were going to stay in our house, that we weren't going to be intimidated out of our home, and we didn't know what we were going to do. And so what we did know we wanted to do is to help youth and families in our community combat this culture of violence that's so prevalent in Chicago. And so for us, sports was a big part of our lives growing up. And so that's what we started. We noticed that, we had a lot of heavy kids in the neighborhood. We had a lot of unactive kids in the neighborhood, kind of like everybody's been saying today, kids not using the parks because of safety, parents not wanting their kids to be outside because of safety. And so, we never intended on starting an organization. We just, what are we going to do? Just trying to fill little needs here and there. And so today, we program over 1,000 kids in our community. Guys who went to prison for the attacks on our house 13 years ago, their kids are in our programs. I play sports with some of the other guys, and we have conversations that go something like this. Remember when we set your house on fire? Yeah. Yes, I do. And so we've also seen a lot of success around reclaiming public spaces. One of the spaces that we're very intentional about in our community is the Gary Ortiz School Campus, which sits in the dividing line of the Kings and the 2-6. And so if you don't know about the Latin Kings in Chicago, FBI put away the head guy in Little Village, and they just sentenced him back in January, February this year. FBI reported that in Illinois alone, he had 10,000 guys reporting to him. All right. So this is definitely a culture issue. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of success. A space that sits on a play space that historically has not been used, that sits on the boundary between the Latin Kings and their biggest rival, the 2-6, is now a thriving play space in our community. And that's what we do at Beyond the Ball. We do sports-based youth and community development. It's not just about providing opportunities for kids to play in recreational activities, but it's how do we leverage those relationships and build community through them.
Good afternoon. I'm Chet Jackson, Executive Director for the West Humboldt Park Development Council. Sort of the history of the Development Council was founded on violence prevention in the neighborhood. Within West Humboldt Park, there have been high rates of crime, both domestic and gang-related. As a matter of fact, last year, We're in the 11th Police District, so we have the highest crime rate in the city. So a lot of the programming that the organization has done to date has been around violence prevention or creating alternatives for community residents to participate in activities that are positive, giving them alternatives that will kind of help them deviate from the crime that occurs in the community. During my tenure, I've been here, close to 2 years now. One of the things that we've been working on is, along with Sky and Children's Glorious Hospital, is understanding the intersection of violence and obesity. Now, one of the programs that we have at Development Council is called the Healthy Communities Initiative. And so under that, we have several programs. We've got healthy cooking. We have exercise program. We've got the West Humboldt Park Farmers Market. So we've got all the programming in place, but yet the people are not coming. So why are they not coming? Because they cannot walk down the street without fear of getting shot, run over, stabbed, whatever. And as an aside, I live in a community, so it's really particularly germane to me because, I like to walk, and I can't even walk to work because I have to deal with the drug dealers on the corner and things of that nature. So one of the things that we're looking at is what is that intersection, how does it impact, and what is the overall effect of violence on people of color in neighborhoods that don't have access to resources. Now, we got the resources, we just don't have the people who are willing to come out the house.
Great, thanks. So that gives you some example of four, we think, key organizations and initiatives around the city that really are operating at this intersection, either explicitly or just by the very nature of how they do the work they do. So, for example, at CPS, they're really focused on safety, but it's safety so kids can get to school by walking and biking, and so clearly they're at that intersection. Rob's work clearly at the intersection because one issue forced the other for him and his wife, and then the neighborhood sort of engaging them. Before we broaden out the conversation, I just want to ask any of the four of you if there are opportunities for folks here in the room or their organizations to specifically get involved in anything you're doing, just to give them a sense of how they can do that. Chet says he loves volunteers,
I love volunteers.
So that's the way you can get in touch with West Humboldt Park. This one is also working at it.
The volunteers too. Any school, if you live in Chicago, you probably have a school in your neighborhood. We always welcome volunteers, whether it be just hall monitors, welcoming parents, what have you. In addition, if you know people who are interested in working for our Safe Passage program, we're always recruiting. If you go to our website, cbs.edu, there's a button on there called Safe Passage. Please encourage people people in your organizations. We are always looking for great people.
Like CLOCC, Sky really is only as strong as its participants, so I encourage you all to come to our quarterly meetings and participate. You'll get information about that in the future, I think.
I would say for us, we have a lot of homegrown help, so programmatically, we're good with the kids who have grown up in our programs. Actually, Jesus is here today. He's one of our full-time staff members, and we've known him since he was in 3rd grade. So he just graduated from college last year, and we're excited to have him. So we have got a lot of homegrown help, but it's a lot of young help. So we're always interested in, this is like a brain trust here. A lot of research, a lot of those types of folks. Always interested in that kind of help.
Great. So I like that you called this room a brain trust. So given that there's so many brains in the room, I want to ask, anybody else have organizations or examples of work that you're involved in or of that are really at this intersection of violence prevention and obesity prevention that maybe are a little bit different than some of the examples you've heard today? Don't be shy. Think about all the things that Larry said about how these things are connected, reclaiming space, encouraging people to get to the places in their communities where there might be healthy food or where people might be able to play. Community engagement, youth development, any of these kinds of things where if you really think about it, you are actually touching on the intersection of these. I'm seeing some nodding heads, but no one's raising hand. Our first hand.
My firsthand experience is I'm a dietitian with the Pediatric Weight Management Program at Sinai Children's, And so I see kids come in through our clinic that are referred from doctors, and we have this fitness program. And in the past year, we have sometimes played softball or baseball, and I'm learning that the barriers between getting outside also lead to barriers to learning these classic games that they don't know how to play. The one a couple weeks ago, we were playing kickball, and the kid ran from first base to third base. I'm like, whoa, 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 wait, stop. And he's like, whoa, I've never played this game before. So something that I've grown up with, thinking that was second nature, we had to take a couple of steps back because these kids don't have the access because they don't feel comfortable.
That's great. Something we talk a lot about at CLOCC, and especially with early childhood folks, is the fact that we're not born knowing how to kick a ball, run, hop, jump, skip. These very basic fundamentals of physical activity are learned, and if we don't live in environments where we actually can practice those things, then we're not going to be successful in organized sports or later on in life just in physical activity alone. I know CPS deals with that a lot. Other thoughts about work at this intersection or examples? Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Celia Francis, and I work at Chicago State University and had the opportunity to work with some of the community organizations. One specifically, the Greater Grand Crossing Community Development Organization, was working to help clean up a park. And went out over the summer to one of their activities. They had the night out, and noticed how kids are now going to the park, Grand Crossing Park, and playing, like you said, and seeing them. So a byproduct of them just going out and cleaning up the park and then talking with the 6th and 3rd District about the crime in that area, now the kids are beginning to come out and you're seeing them play a lot more over the summer. And so out of fighting crime, kids are now getting exercise. So I think that was great.
That's great, and that's a great signal to something the group at the table here and I had a call a couple of weeks ago just to kind of frame out some of the things we were going to talk about. And this notion of reclaiming space was an important theme for a lot of us. So I want to ask the folks at the table to think a little bit or to talk a little bit about the approaches that you're using or that you've used in the past to get at this notion of reclaiming space, what that means for your organizations, how you've done it, and then we'll ask for some other examples.
So a lot of the stuff that we've learned about reclaiming space has been completely accidental. It's been responding, it's like what necessity is the mother of invention, right? The first time we ever used our Gary Ortiz campus as an outdoor play space, we weren't doing it because we wanted to. We were doing it because we needed a space big enough to have a picnic for the kids who were in our kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade program, and their families. And we're like, well, we can't do it in the school because the school's too small, and you can't cook in the school either. And so my wife's like, hey, and basically all the stuff that we do is my wife has this crazy idea, and I say that's a terrible idea, and we do it anyway, and it's great. And that's what happened. She said, let's have a picnic outside. And I'm like, why? We can't have a picnic outside. Nobody's going to come. The kids aren't going to come. Their parents are going to want to bring them. We do it anyway. We have over 1,000 people show up for this picnic. And when you see 1,000 people in a space that the only time you ever see people is they're picking up kids from school and leaving school, and it's empty, like 20 minutes after school is over, but you see 1,000 people in there, and boy, it just pumps you up, and it's like, wow, there is so much potential in this. And so one of the things that we learned was that when you're like 5th grade, 6th grade, a lot of times in the neighborhood you already lost your innocence. A lot of times you're guilty by association. But one of the things that we learned is that everybody in the neighborhood, whether you're gang involved, not gang involved, when you're dealing with kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, they still have innocence. And gang members don't live in a bubble. Drug dealers don't live in a bubble. And a lot of these young kids, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, it's their children. It's their brothers and sisters. And so what we started doing is we started being more intentional about programming or having programs for families, especially with younger children. And it just completely changed the mentality about how people viewed that space. That was no longer the gang fighting space where the gangs looked for each other to fight. It was the space where our neighborhood children played. And, you know, we kind of stumbled across that, and we've been kind of riding that for the last 5 years. And I could show you pictures, you know, if you look all around that school, there is gang graffiti from like the ground to like 10 feet high everywhere. And it used to be like that on the school campus too. You walk in there tonight and you'll probably see a couple hundred people playing out there. You won't see any gang graffiti, and that's what we want, right? We want those, but just a lot of that thinking outside the box and being, you know, every space has its own challenges, but that's what worked for us.
And Rob, I remember on the phone you were sort of saying that you thought one of the reasons why this was successful was because when you focus on really young kids, everybody can agree that they want young kids to have the best start. So if there's that common interest and goal that people can organize around, that helps, you know, let's focus on the spaces where young kids need to be able to be and be safe. Yeah. Other thoughts about reclaiming space?
All right, so this is on. All right. So this summer is really very interesting for me, particularly. We did the Play Streets program, and it was really interesting because we literally would go out and would identify a street, and the street would get closed off, and the kids would actually come out and play. What was striking to me in this process was not only were the neighbors out and the kids were out, but the drug dealers were not anywhere around. So it started me to thinking, you know, how do we continue this process going forward? And so what I'm thinking in my head is an intergenerational type of program, because what's missing is that connectivity that you spoke about, which is really important. Even though these are drug dealers, but these drug dealers in this neighborhood don't necessarily live there. But still, there's somebody's kid, there's somebody's uncle, and there needs to be some level of connectivity that lets them know that there are other ways to live your life. And so as we're going forward, one of the things that I want to concentrate on is how do we create intergenerational programs, and how do we get people out of the houses and into the neighborhood. And so with the Play Street piece, it's really obvious that it can be done, because I didn't think it could be done, but I was proven wrong, which is really great.
How about out in the room? Any thoughts about reclaiming space or ways that your organizations use to reclaim space?
Hi, my name is Del Kane, and I'm with Near North Health Service Corporation. We provide nutrition education and cooking classes, and I am a part of the West Humboldt Park Development Healthy Initiative, along with claiming space, but I think it's important to build upon your success. I remember when we did our first pilot program in West Humboldt Park on healthy cooking, and we had a great success, and that came to a whole year program being funded, and it was extended another year. We're looking for other location because we were offering it during the daytime. A lot of people that we met from doing one type of event, they worked during the day, one in the evening. So I believe in building from success, and also having partnerships with others so that you can expand the program. It's one thought that that comes to mind, that I believe a film is a favorite film of mine from Fields of Dream. If you would build it, they would come, and I hold a strong foundation towards that. I remember when we first maybe started, classes were maybe 6, 8 people, but now we have classes at sometimes there are over 20 people in a waiting list. So it was you know, like a vacancy there, but if you build something, I believe people will come and then have the resources, financially as well as human resource, to expand it and build upon it.
And sometimes I think, you know, in some of my work, even before coming to CLOCC, when I worked in communities in New Orleans, you do an event one time and people kind of want to know when is it going to happen next. And I think there's a tension between, well, we need to move it because we want other people engaged, and we're going to have it in the same place the next time, because having the same thing in the same place over time is a way of reclaiming space. That space becomes known for something different than it historically might be known in the community. So I think it's a tension for us to sort of think about, and speaks to what Larry was talking about earlier about whether we're going to be kind of doing violence prevention accidentally or doing it intentionally, and talking about the role it plays in the work we do.
Thank you. Our our organization really focuses on family and community development. But I'd like to share an example of one of the programs that one of our colleagues, our partners in South Africa, actually in Soweto, has worked on, and that's creating parks. It's creating parks and reclaiming space, but it's doing it in a very interesting way where they develop a part of the park for very young children, a part of the park which is more of a skateboard, kind of a part for youth, but also a health park for the adults, so that they bring the adults there to be close. And those would be exercise machines. And when we drove around and we looked at the health parks very early in the morning, but throughout the day, people are waiting to use those health machines that are out there in the parks for all. And I've got colleagues in Medellin as well. We've been working in Medellin for our community and family development program. And what we're really doing is trying to help parents have the confidence to let their children be leaders, and also for them to become more active and role in modeling behaviors. And that really plays into the asking parents or encouraging parents to play the sports, to learn the sports, learn the games, and spend the time outside with their children instead of just allowing their children to go out and play, but participating together.
Thanks. Jadine or Dan, did you have anything to add on this reclaiming space
I just
question?
wanted to, it's sort of a little bit of a different take, but building on what some of the people have said, I think, have most people heard This American Life on Harper High School? Did you guys hear that piece? For those of you who have not, This American Life on public radio did, I think it was a 3-part or 2-parter on the violence that one high school, Harper High School, experienced in 1 year. So it was approximately 26 current and former students had gotten shot in the span of 1 school year. I had just started with CPS, and 26 kids from 1 school. Now that school is not a very big school on top of that. So when you look at the percentage of kids involved, you say, something's wrong and we gotta figure this out. So what we did was we interviewed these children. We talked to the students and said, what do you think is going on with this? And it sounds like kind of a cliche, but we heard the same thing over and over, which is we need jobs. We need something positive in our lives. So we went out and we got resources. So not just so kids could reclaim their space, but they were reclaiming their lives. And so we essentially empowered them. We didn't know how many we were going to get. So we had a day. I had gone out, just started making phone calls to different organizations. These resources existed. This didn't cost CPS a penny. Called, do you have 50 jobs you can give us or funding for? And they're like, sure. Did I say 50? I meant 100. I meant 150. So we got 150 jobs. And guess what? We had more than enough to cover the children that were interested. All these students showed up. They interviewed. I put that in quotes because we wanted everyone to be a winner. It wasn't a hookup, but you had to earn your interview. They all came in neckties. The women came in suits. It was beautiful. And they didn't get just, make work. We had people working for elected officials. We had people working in hospitals. We had people, when I say people, I'm talking about the students. We had people working, you name it, in real offices. And these are careers then that these young people can now look forward to, because they were all sophomores, juniors, and seniors. But the neatest thing was we had one that was a therapy dog training program. Everyone said they can't get there because they can't cross the gang lines. And by the way, they're all in different gangs. They're all going to fight. We had 30 young people in one group. Probably 10, if you say, cliques represented. Not one incident at all summer. 100%, actually 105% attendance because they brought friends. It went so well. And guess what? From the minute that interview, the first day of that interview, to the end of that summer, into November. So we went a whole 6 months, not one shooting. So we went from 26 in 1 school year to 0 for 6 months. Now, we celebrate progress. Obviously, whenever there is a shooting, it's still as difficult as if, the last one. However, we are making progress in that. We do this with partnerships with the community, with the organizations, community-based organizations, with our partners at CPD. Beyond the Ball, I met Rob, actually, because when they were building that soccer field, that's when we met, because they needed just more push behind to get that thing done faster. Those are the kind of things we all have to coordinate together. And I say that again because the resources do exist. Someone said this. It's just a matter of coordinating them.
That's great. Dan, in the work you do with gangs, do you talk about space as an issue and, asking them to do what they do in other places? Give us any examples.
Right. it's interesting. I mean, almost all what we do is kind of reclaiming space, reclaiming norms, and reclaiming space, because a lot of the altercations are out in public. So we've started some group level work where we brought people in from different gangs and cliques in some neighborhoods. Other neighborhoods, we have to work within the gang. But we talk about the dynamics of kind of violent events in the city. Possible role of bystanders, people getting egged on, how to avoid those. That's one of the biggest things we talk about in terms of behavior change is kind of stimulus control. Well, if you go to the club with this friend who always gets in trouble, that's a bad idea. So you got to put this friend on probation or not go to the club with him. And so that's one example. And then we talk about street conflicts and over women. And a lot of it is kind of renegotiating the norms. And we're going to be having a public education campaign coming up, and that's really focused on helping a friend. And so, we're really focused on that, how to help a friend. I think it's, you have influence, use it. So again, just kind of educating about the different type of violence that happens in different spaces and norms, kind of rolled up together. So.
Great, thanks. So another theme that came up in our call, and Becky, I'm going to kick this one to you to start off, was community engagement and the importance of having community stakeholders involved in the work that we're doing. Larry mentioned this earlier in his keynote, so I just want to ask you, Becky, to start us off on kind of how do we see that as being connected to these issues and efforts you've used or seen that have been successful?
So, great question. And we actually just talked about that. That was basically the theme of our discussion in the physical activity and built environment interest group right before this meeting started. So I mentioned that Sky is really interested in this issue of neighborhood level engagement and advocacy. It's kind of the crux of our collaboration with West Humboldt Park Development Council. If you talk to community members about obesity prevention in their community, or about violence prevention in their community, or oral health in their community, that's not how they're breaking these things down. They're interested in the health, safety, well-being, happiness of the kids in the community. And so I think we have to kind of break down those walls. One approach to advocacy is going to work regardless of what issue you're talking about. And sometimes by looking at these multifaceted approaches, we're going to have more success. So I think, and I hope this isn't getting out too far ahead of ourselves, but from the physical activity and built environment interest group, we really did talk about this idea of having an advocacy workshop to work with teams who have kind of already gone through this process of assessing what's going on in the neighborhood, what problems are we seeing, and to turn that into a meaningful plan for action and advocacy. So whether that's talking to your alderman about improved lighting, right, so that people feel safer being out and about and walking around, or whether that's talking to the supervisor of the local park about something so that people feel more comfortable using that park, feel safer about it. A lot of these things are really cross-cutting, and a lot of it is very much that neighborhood level advocacy that we're hoping to support.
Anyone else at the table want to talk about community engagement?
One thing about community engagement, when it comes to under-resourced communities, a lot of times the perception from people outside is that there's nothing good happening there. There's no good people there. And that could be the furthest thing from the truth. There's just so many people who are great people and who are very giving people who want to volunteer. They just don't have the resources or the connections or access to spaces. We did something, for some reason in the summers you get an influx in the neighborhood of programming money, right? So there's lots of stuff to keep kids busy during the summers, but then during the school year it kind of dries up, and then the expectation that kids are going to be involved in school and whatnot, and so in our community we noticed that a lot of violence picked up throughout the school year, and then it kind of slowed down in the summer. Actually, we had Harvard worked on that project, and it showed that our peaks of violence were right when school ended and right when school started, and in the summer it kind of lulled, and then and we don't know why, again, research people, But anyway, one of the things that we did is we got everybody to the table anybody who's interested in kids playing or sports. So it was anything from grandparents to the park district to local, teachers or principals to community organizations, and we call it Neighborhood Sports Little Village. And what it is usually is you don't have access to spaces, but usually there's somebody at that table who knows somebody or has power over something that maybe this group, they're a dance program, but in the winter they can't dance because they don't have a gym. Well, this pastor is interested in kids playing, and they have a gym, but the only time they ever use it is on Friday nights for the youth group. Well, you kind of put those two people together. Next thing you know, you have a boxing program in that church, you have a dance program in that church, but just the idea of that community engagement and seeing everybody who's there in the community as a potential, partner. But really just reaching out to those stakeholders. For us in outdoor spaces, I heard a lot of outdoor space things today. When we started the process in 2009 to get a $1.8 million field renovation done at our local place there in Little Village, the Garrett's campus. And what happened was once it was built, we knew that we didn't have the capacity to program that every day, all day. But through this network, through this community engagement, getting people to kind of like sign up for slots. Because the more people you have in those spaces, the more adults you have in those spaces, the more that becomes a place where people go to do things and not just a park space, then the more you're going to have the ability to change that culture.
Great. And I know that a lot of the organizations in the room today work on initiatives where there's serious community engagement. So I want to encourage us to kind of keep sharing with each other successful approaches to engaging community, whether or not it's around violence and safety in neighborhoods, just to kind of keep the strategies and techniques alive and moving through the room. The sort of closing 10 minutes, I want to ask folks to start thinking about kind of lessons learned or pitfalls that we've come across as we focused on work at this intersection, or things we think we can inform each other with around how we get at the intersection between violence and obesity prevention. So I'm going to start with anyone at the table that wants to start, but I'm going to ask folks in the room also to think about any tensions you're struggling with, critical lessons you've learned, pitfalls you've experienced that you want others to avoid. So be thinking about those because I'm going to walk around the room with the mic. But I'll start with folks at the table.
So I think one of the things that we know from both violence prevention and obesity prevention is that programs are not enough. If programs were the answer, we have 1 million violence prevention programs in Chicago. If programs were the answer, we wouldn't have a violence problem. So I can't emphasize enough, and I know CLOCC shares this emphasis, the importance of that focus on policy systems and environmental change to sustainability. So if you're working on something that you know is great, is making a difference for kids in your community, it's important to team up with the people who can help you evaluate that and share that information so that it can be spread, so that policies can support that, so there can be dollars supporting that, so there are systems that make this part of the fabric of what happens. Otherwise, the great work that you're done, we know how this kind of work goes, right? Your funding's going to cease. A foundation is going to say, all right, we need to move on to the next new thing, or maybe the person who's running that program is going to move on to a new opportunity, and that work often leaves with the people or the funding and the great work that you've done. And if it benefited a certain number of kids for a little while, and then it's done. So we all really need to pay attention to that sustainability.
Just real quick, and this kind of goes to the community engagement. We do a lot of GIS mapping at Ceasefire, Cure Violence, and it's always negative. It's always the crime, usually shootings, killings, maybe some mediations. But part of our game planning process, and we map groups, cliques, what I want to get to, what we haven't got to yet, but is asset-based mapping, asset-based community development. That's the map I want to see in all our neighborhoods. That we'll have our maps in the back area for our strategy to reduce shootings, but in the front, I want an asset map of all the parks, all the different coalitions, There's a lot of assets that people have been shown in low-income neighborhoods. Map individual assets, block clubs, all of that. And I think, that's a role that we could possibly help out, even just constructing, because we construct these huge maps that we put on walls. So, I kind of put out a call for partners there, that if ceasefire is on a coalition or engage them, we could offer some of our skills that way. But I think it's important, this reclaiming space and intentionality, which I think is a big theme. What I've learned in kind of community development and safety and violence is the importance of small wins. While we're trying to reduce shootings and killings, you need to give little segments of the community. It could be small little grants. I think Larry mentioned this, that, whether it's a little garden or just one block club can get 2,000. That's a way to get people engaged, and I think that's a way to go across the different coalitions, because it could be something for, obesity, but, you think about the safety. You think about the intergenerational that people have been saying, and we could tie these things together. So just a quick plug for that.
Great, thanks. Melody, you had something.
Really quickly, I think this whole theme today speaks to what I'm going to say, and that's try not to get caught up in the either or. It's either violence prevention or obesity prevention, but it's both and. And the very definition again of what we're talking about today is the intersection of those two. But it's awfully easy to walk away from a session like this and say, well, my piece, is food, or my piece is transportation. And, I really got to stay in that silo. So, and we can say this to communities too. Communities may have one concern is greater than another, but we don't have to say either, we do violence prevention or we do obesity. We can do both. We can do both and a lot of the strategies are the same. So just to kind of keep that as a theme.
Can I jump in real quickly?
Sure,
As I'm listening to the various comments, I think it's really important for people in the room to understand and appreciate the communities that they work in. I think sometimes when you are not of color and you work in a community of color, you don't understand the nuances. As a change agent that I am, I understand the difficulty that community residents are having in terms of embracing new. New is difficult for a lot of people. And so when you're trying to do a paradigm shift, it's a lot longer. It's an uphill battle because, again, you're used to certain types of activities occurring. Resources are still there, but they're not really getting to the essence of what the issue is. And so it's really access and being safe, and how do you do that? And so how do you change that paradigm shift? So as people are doing this type of work, add that level of sensitivity to what you're doing, and I bet you'll see a difference in how you're received.
Hi, I just have a quick comment, because we're at the end of the day, and my name is Karina, by the way. I'm from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. This is my first time here at the CLOCC meeting. I'm a former Children's employee, so this is kind of how I found out about it, and I'm so glad I did. I'm leaving here with so many ideas. Just want to put something out there for both the Little Village neighborhood and even further south in Chicago. I'm also part of this coalition to end family homelessness in Chicago. It's a 10-year plan. It's called FACT, Family Assertive Community Treatment. For those of you that are interested, I would be more than happy to have you be linked up. It's a coalition that has 50 social service agencies across the city involved. And it's all about kind of regaining some spaces, putting the word out there in family shelters, creating, child-friendly spaces. So it's all about that cross-disciplinary action that we've been talking about all day today. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. And I think a reminder, Larry again talked about this, and Dan a little bit in his just showing the demographic profiles of these communities where they're most active. Poverty is a huge underlying issue here, and we haven't touched on that. We could do a whole other meeting on the intersection between violence, obesity, and poverty prevention. We won't, at least not now. But I think that's a key theme. And homelessness, I think, is certainly one of the issues that pushes people into activities that make a community feel unsafe. And people who are homeless have to deal with the issue of safety, certainly far greater than many of the rest of us.
Hi, my name is Katie. This is my first meeting as well, so it's been great. It seems to me at face value that, and I hate to, if this is like a very political issue, I don't want to start anything, especially 5 minutes before we're done, but it would seem to me at face value that organization or a company like Walmart moving in would satisfy a lot of these issues, or bring opportunity for jobs and like they say, fresh fruit or fresh food. And I'm just wondering if you had expectations for the company moving in all over Chicago, and if they met your expectations, or it's changed at all your viewpoint on Walmart. Oh, good.
Well, I have no viewpoint on Walmart, but I can tell you one thing, that if a company comes to the West Chicago Avenue corridor, they better be socially responsible. That much I can tell you. It's not so much that I have a problem with the business coming in, but coming in and adding value is more critical in my mind than the business coming in. So Walmart definitely serves its purpose, but at the end of the day, what's the value proposition for community residents? So if it's not only just access to food, employment opportunities, and I don't mean entry level, I mean a career track, because that's the way out of poverty. So that's kind of where my mindset is. I welcome new businesses, but you better have something for us, or else it's not going to be a good match.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to go to Larry for some closing words on something, but I think, the other thing to think about is the unintended consequences of businesses. We know from some of our work on the South Side that sometimes when these big stores come in, it actually closes local businesses because they're focusing on one particular thing that now you can buy at a superstore, so all these small businesses close. So it may create some jobs for some people, but it destroys some jobs for other people, and so that's another tension I think we have to keep in mind. I'm going to ask Larry in the last couple minutes to just close on this concept of intentionality, and bearing in mind what Melody said about not wanting to say we're either this or that. The fact of the matter is many of us are mission-driven and funder-driven, and we may be funded to work on nutrition or funded to work on physical activity, or we may consider ourselves an obesity prevention organization. I started this off by saying CLOCC isn't going to become a violence prevention organization. These are all true, bearing in mind the notion that these lines are necessarily have to blur. I'm going to ask Larry to close with some words about how we, that don't consider ourselves violence prevention organizations, how do we be intentional about violence prevention in our work?
Well, I feel like I probably said everything that I wanted to say earlier. What's happened since then, as perhaps the only person in this room not from Chicago, or not from the Chicago area at least, I'm just amazed and impressed by everything that's going on. One of our failures in community work, I think, is to really identify and celebrate heroes. And I feel like I'm sitting at a table and sitting in a room filled with heroes. And I feel like there's heroism at the community level, which is extraordinary, and there's heroism at the institutional level, which is also extraordinary, and there's heroism at the interface of that, which is also extraordinary. And I think the heroism is not an outcome. It's really an attribute for us to build on. And I think, as Rob was saying earlier, there are a lot of assets in our communities that we fail to see. And many times it's asking the right questions and coming in really very, very committed and open-minded. It's very clear to me that trying to do something about violence is probably one of the things that would most be defined as impossible. We can't get traction. It's the police's problem. It's those people. There's so many ways that the vitality and the importance of the work gets denigrated. And that if we identify the right questions, come in with open-minded, one of the questions, I think, is what do we want institutions to do? What should we expect from the schools? What should we expect from health? How are they going to play a role to solve community problems? What do we expect from community residents, and what do we expect from community leaders? My experience in every paradigm shift, I'm so glad you brought up the notion of paradigm shift and norms change. And I was thinking earlier today about the resistance to changing the way healthcare works. And those people too are stuck in the old way of doing things and have a very, very hard time. But my experience of change happening is really the analogy of a snowball. And it starts out small, and as it rolls down the hill, all of a sudden it gets bigger, and the bigger it is, the bigger it's going to get. And I think we're at a time now where we recognize change is critical. We recognize we're full people. We're not a nutritionist. We're not a physical activity person. We're full people, and we must insist on thriving communities. We must insist on lives that are not filled with fear. And if we insist on that and are strategic in pushing for it, I really think that we can emerge today much more capable as a city of starting to develop that kind of change.
Thanks, Larry. I want to thank Chet and Rob and Dan and Becky and Jadine for being here to help us have this conversation. I want to thank all of you for your attention, your energy, and your thinking, and I want to encourage you to keep this question alive in the work you do individually, but also as you interact with others in the CLOCC interest groups. Keep us as a collective thinking about the intentionality of the intersection. I want to remind people, because we did this new format, we're really interested to hear from you how you think it worked. So use your evaluation form to tell us whatever you think about today, and we look forward to seeing everybody in December. So thanks again for being here.